Good afternoon and namaskar to all of you here today. Um, I'm actually delighted to have two very diverse people with me. Being a cultural historian and somebody who loves Indian music and dance and has been associated with a lot of museums. In fact, I have set up a gallery at Udaipur City Palace Museum on sculpture and a museum of folk and tribal art in Kanha. So it makes me very, very happy to be with Christopher, who has fictionalized a story which is set in the whole building of museums in colonial India, which spans from 1854 to 1857. And the book is called, may I? It's called The Museum of the World. So this is very, very interesting. And Sohini has done the book on Kali, the great goddess. So while I also work on gender and sexuality, to have a Kali on my left and a museum story writer on my right puts me in a very, very interesting geography and a very challenging space. The only thing is, I'm just wondering how to marry the two. So I'm going to be completely inventive and talk out of the box. So both my participants in the session they are also very inventive people, so they'll play the journey and the game together, and we are going to embark on a journey where I hope there are surprises for all of us. I am going to begin in a different way. I'm not going to begin with a woman, which normally ladies first. No, I'm going to begin with Christopher. I'm going to ask him, being a German, and I overheard him say that he grew up in Bavaria. So the three protagonists who are part of a museum journey in India, that's where the story is set, are from Bavaria. He's taken a young orphan from Bombay, and a Father Fuchs, if my pronunciation is right, a German priest, who is mentor to the young boy. I'm going to ask him, from Berlin, where he lives, and Delhi, why did he decide to do this colonial journey of India? Is it because of Max Muller philosophy and this great engagement with homeopathy, which the Germans have? Why did he decide to write? Because the Germans are known for their great wonder boxes of museums. Why did he decide to embark on a colonial journey in India?
Well, thank you so much for the introduction, and also thank you for being here. I'm very happy to return to Pune. I think it's my third time, and with a third book to be here. So I'm very glad, especially since I just left Delhi and the fogginess of it. That's a very, very good question. Why I decided to write about it, and especially with historic stories, I always ask myself, if I read a book that is more historical, like, why do we need to read about this today, or what does this have to do with us today? Apart from the fact that it might be an interesting aspect of history. And in this case, I don't know if I knew that when I started writing it or when I started working on it, but definitely after having finished it, I realized that it has much more to do with myself than I was aware at the beginning. Because I grew up in a very small village in Bavarian countryside. Every 15 minutes you hear the church bells ringing, so the church tells you the time in this town. And people actually do wear like lederhosen, and they drink like beer from 1 liter glasses. All these cliches are true. Believe me, I was not a big fan of it, but later when I met my wife, who's from India, and I started spending much more time here, I started seeing things from an obviously very different perspective, and also in a very critical way about Germany and how Germany looks at the world. And when I came across the story, I was fascinated from the beginning. I just didn't know how to tell it, because it's a good pitch. It's like these 3 scientists supported by the East India Company, and Humboldt, and they went mid-19th century, just before the uprising, went to India and did all this research, did a lot of mischief. Only 2 of them returned. I mean, you can basically do that as an elevator pitch if you're next to a producer from Bollywood or Hollywood or whatever. But I didn't know how to tell the story, and I felt like I don't want to write another book where it's, these 3 white men from Bavaria go to a very faraway place and they look at everything through a magnifying glass, and then they're like, oh, this is so strange and so different from what we know. And that's why at some point I had to invent this character who's the narrator of the story, who's Bartholomew. He's this 12-year-old orphan boy. And what suddenly made it interesting for me to tell, and what suddenly also resonated with a lot of my experiences since I've been here, is like turning the perspective around and the way he looks at these, well, you could say colonizers, because they're scientists, but after all, what they were doing is they were gathering information for the colonizers, and how he looks at them. And it's almost like they become an object. He suddenly turns these colonizers who tended to, give names to things and decide what things are and how they are. He analyzes them, and he looks at them very critically, and he objectifies them. And that suddenly helped me, look at the world in a very different way, also in a more appealing way, because after all, I have to have fun when I write my book, because I have to deal with it for a long time. It's like a relationship. I have to be in a relationship with this book for some years, so I have to have some joy when I do that. And I think that's why, that's what I realized at some point, that I really wanted to, speaking about German audiences, I wanted to look at this whole colonial construct from a different point of view, and not from the classical German view, which is usually, we didn't have much to do with colonies, and even if we had, that time was very brief. And on top of that, we brought a lot of, knowledge, and Max Müller, and we brought good things to the world, but unfortunately it's much more complicated than that.
You see, the thing is that he's talking about museums, and now, while he was talking about it, I got the hook how to get in the Kali. Now, while he's talking of objects and objectification of individuals, I'm going to talk about some of the images which are present in museums and homes, and that is the power of the feminine divine, which is Kali. And as Sohini has beautifully dedicated it, she has dedicated it to all women, made of love and fire, and the men who fan the fire. So we have a man fanning the fire of museum collections and fictionalizing it. And we have a woman who's celebrating their inner Kali that transforms to love and light now and forever. Now, the dance of Kali there's a pun on the word dance, because Sohini is a dancer herself, and she is talking about the dance of Kali. We normally think of, when we think of dance, we think of Nataraj, who's the lord of dance. But here she's talking of the dance of Kali, which is another kind of cosmic dance, which is about power, gender, sexuality. And the interesting thing is that she has balanced it, because this book, the research and the co-author of this book is none other than her son Rishi Das Gupta, who also plays the acoustic guitar. So I want to ask her that as a dancer, she's danced to many, many themes. It's just not the gods, the goddesses, the myths, but also spring, seasons. She's a teacher. Why did she decide to write the book on the dance of Kali, which she says is from darkness to light?
Thank you, Alka. It's a very wonderful question, and we can talk about it. And thank you, PILF, for having me here. And I'm very honored that Dr. Alka Pande is talking to me and launching my book. Thank you. So, Dance of Kali, I wanted to write, I have lived in Spain and been working in 14 different countries of the world. And I felt there to be a deep sense of cultural racism. When you look at simple things, when you look at Peter Sellers and how an Indian musician is portrayed, you know, where all that black mark on his face and behaving like a clown, we don't even pause to think that this is offensive and this is disrespectful. Even fellow Indians in America will laugh at it. And I think that is cultural racism. When you see a film, The Temple of Doom, where our spirituality is all reduced to some kind of caricaturish demonic figure and people eating snakes or people eating whatever. So that is what the picture, the projection of our mythology, of our cultural heritage that sells in the West sometimes, not to everybody, but to a majority. So I wanted to bust those myths, and I wanted to start with Kali, who is probably the most controversial of all figures in mythology and in spirituality. And the concept of Tantra, which is completely misinterpreted in the West. I have a dance center in Spain and people have actually called up saying, okay, do you have a course on tantric sex? We would like to come. I said, nothing doing, please don't come. You know, so this is Tantra, what it is all about, the tantric perspective of Kali, the sheer philosophy of Kali as raw, empowered womanhood is what I wanted to bring out, and I wanted to bust those myths, and I wanted to tell people like Heidi Klum, a kind of very famous model, who's going to a Halloween party dressed up like her favorite demon, that is Kali, and the world media covering it. So I thought it would be my little way of busting such stupidity that makes me feel very offended with the disrespect, and bringing a little bit of light to our mythologies, to our sacred texts, and to women, the feminism in the true Vedic sense as defined in the Markandeya Puranas. That was my reason for writing it. Thank you, Alka.
So there's another link I find in both the books and cultural racism. I think to some extent Chirstopher is also looking to break the myth because, there's a very interesting article which was done on his work. I think it was in the Hindu, which says, I have it here with me, which says the novel, just one minute, yeah. The novel helps the reader look into the history of colonial acquisition from a new perspective. So he's also trying to break the myth of colonialism, where there definitely is that kind of, again, if I may be allowed to suggest, Occidental superiority at looking at our ajaib ghars or museums of wonder. And I would ask Chirstopher to read an excerpt from the book, which perhaps can help our audience here to understand a little bit of the essence and maybe titillate them to buying your book.
And that's mandatory anyway. You know that. Like if you sit in this session, you have to buy our books. Like that's. Yeah, Temple of Doom was a great example. I watched it as a kid, and of course as a kid, like growing up in Germany, like Bavaria, I loved it. It's like adventure and so on. I didn't think one moment about it. Now, like a few years ago, it was again some running somewhere, and I was watching. I was like, oh God, it's so embarrassing. And then I had this friend who told me that you probably all know, but I didn't know that when they wanted to shoot the movie in India, the Indian government didn't allow it. So they were like, we don't want you to shoot that movie here. It's really. So they shot a lot of the scenes in Sri Lanka. But the thing is, when Indiana Jones ends up in this in one village, all the local people, they're not speaking an Indian language, but like, who cares? Like in the West, they're just speaking some language that we don't understand. So, whatever. I mean, it's so terrible. I think I'm gonna read something from the beginning of the book, so you get an idea of basically the voice of Bartholomew, because then you get a glimpse of this tone and how he looks at the world. My name is Bartholomew. I am at least 12 years old. And today, on 20th October 1854, I have founded India's first museum. I call it the Museum of the World. Smitaben says it should be called the Museum of Wretchedness. But what does a cook from Gujarat really know about such things? I do not want to write anything bad about her, even if she cannot read. But time and again she surprises me with how little she understands in more than one regard. After over 10 years in Bombay, she can barely speak a word of Marathi or Hindi. Without my help, no one in the glass house would know what she has cooked for us, and Smitaben would not be able to tell the sabziwala what vegetables she needs. When he arrives with his cart in front of our gate early in the morning, she has long been up and about cleaning one of the menu windows that give St. Helena its sobriquet. Smitaben is always the first to get up, and I'm not sure whether she sleeps at all. In the evenings, when the lights are put out in the dormitories, we can hear her downstairs in the kitchen scrubbing the pots and chasing the cockroaches. She does not have a family, at any rate, not a real one. All the orphans call her Masi. Her hair is white, not grey like that of other Masis, but white like the dough of the Portuguese bao that she sometimes bakes for us. Smitaben knows a thing or two about taste. I prefer her salty, sweet handvo to all of Bombay's dishes. Unfortunately, her other senses are not as well developed. She has spent so much of her life looking at ordinary things that she does not see what is remarkable. How silly of me not to have thought of that. Smitaben's reaction to India's first museum matched her rustic nature. She gave me a smack on the back of my head, which did not hurt, and disappeared again into her territory, the kitchen. I went outside to show Devinder the museum. Devinder is our gardener. He comes from Punjab. Although he is not a Sikh, he allows his hair to grow all over, he once whispered to me. He claims that to cut one's hair, or indeed to shave, means to lack in any masculinity whatsoever. I claim that Devinder is too lazy and too poor to visit a barber. The first is clearly indicated by the condition of the plants all around the glasshouse. The palms bend as if they were bowing down to the sun. The grass has crept back into the earth, and the mogra flowers wither away before they have fully blossomed. Still, Father Fuchs does not have the heart to dismiss Devinder. That is how I know that Devinder is poor. Because Father Fuchs is overly friendly to everyone he considers poor. He must be one of the friendliest people in Bombay. But I wanted to talk about Devinder. Even without Father Fuchs, I would know that Devinder is poor. Everyone I know is poor. We possess nothing more than the clothes on our backs and our hope. Hope that one day we will not be rich, perhaps, but at least less poor. For there is only one kind of rich, but many forms of poor. The problem is, however, that hope can be a demonic possession. Devinder is literally possessed by it. This should not be surprising, since he lives with his grandmother and his parents, and his wife and her parents and his children in a chawl in Blacktown. There they share one room. They sleep, they eat, and increase their numbers on the one and the same mat. Devinder's family dies far more slowly than it grows. Devinder is probably not lazy at all, just tired. His strength is taken up in keeping his hope alive. He does this best behind the garden shed in the shade of the ficus tree. Buddha attained wisdom under such a tree. Devinder, on the other hand, inhales hope. He does that, like most of us, by sleeping, especially in the afternoon hours when the humid air of Bombay presses all the air from the body, like Smitaben extracting the juice from a ripe imli. The objects in my museum had shifted while being transported to the garden. Before waking Devinder up, I had to arrange them again. Then I nudged him with my foot. Devinder asked me not to disturb him. I promised him that he had never seen anything like my museum. This tempted him. In contrast to Smitaben, Devinder still has a hunger for the remarkable. He rubbed his eyes. I carefully placed the museum down near him. Devinder blinked a few times, looked at it, then at me, then again at it, and finally at me again. I asked him what he saw. An old wooden box, he said. A display area, I said, and asked him what he saw in it. Garbage, he said. My collection, I said. You collect garbage, he asked. I did not want to give up so soon. My collection is a holistic one, I said. He looked at me blankly. I said, holistic means concerning the whole. It is built on the idea that everyone relates to everything else. Every object, however useless it may appear to be, is remarkable, and in its own way it can help us to understand the world. Even a stone, he asked. Especially a stone. He smiled through his thick beard. This puts me in the tradition of Humboldt, I said. He wanted to know what a Humboldt is. The greatest scientist of our times. The greatest scientist of our times collects garbage? Now, that was a bit too much for me. I picked up my museum and left. There was something else I had not considered. In order to recognize something remarkable, one needed not only hunger, but a certain keenness of the eye. Thank you.
That was a lovely entry point into your book. I've seen in the book you've divided it into how many parts is it?
It's like
6 parts?
yeah, 6 parts.
So I'm going to begin backwards. There's an overland route to Europe, which is the back route from 1856 to 57. Before that, there is Central India, 55 to 56. In the Himalayas in 1855, that's part 4. Part 3 is about Kolkata, 1855. Part 2 is about the route to Madras. And he begins with Bombay, where he read from. A question, one point is, how long did it take you to write? And being a German, how did you get into the skin of an Indian boy? Talking about Mogra's orphanage in India, the food, the imli juice. How did you get into that? What was your modus operandi of your research?
Well, the writing part was much shorter than I expected. It was like 2 to 3 years. I think once you know what you want to do and how you're gonna do it, I always feel like the writing part is the easiest. The hardest part is to finding out what you want to do and then and how you're gonna approach that. And then also, of course, again, looking at what you've done. So like the not writing part is always why it takes so long to write. So in that respect, of course, the research was enormous, because even though only the papers by these Schlagenweits, these brothers who traveled, they've written like several thousand pages about their travels. So I had to read all of them, and unfortunately, they're not great writers. So sometimes you have like 50 pages describing the rainfall in a certain region in India. But in between, you might come across like some interesting observation, but most of the time it's just very scientific and descriptive. So I had kind of like 3 approaches of research as I had to do for the book. The first one was obvious. I had to read about the time. And I mean, that is the easiest part. But more interesting was actually to read from the time, because when you read from the time, it's so fascinating how all the things people said, how they write about it. I mean, in both ways. Like in one way where you sometimes feel like, oh, it's so extreme how racist some things were. But then again, for example, these brothers very often write about how they are very aware and how they see it very critical how the British treat Indians. Like they come in Bombay and they're shocked by it, for example. And that's interesting, no? That they would see that, even though they're also white people. And then the third part, which was the most important research part, and that I guess will explain all the, what distincts it from another boy from in another universe, is just basically a research I didn't know I was doing, because I was living here for 12 years, and I think in that time I learned enough things at least to get into that boy. I mean, part of that is just my job. If I would decide to write about an astronaut, I don't have to have been or be an astronaut. So I have to get into that topic, and the same thing was important here. But having lived here that time, I think without having lived here 12 years, I would not have dared to approach this project at all, because then I would have been another one of these guys who was like, I know better.
So did you travel to Madras, to Kolkata, Central India, all the places that you have written about? Did you go physically to those areas?
To most of these places. I didn't go too much into the Himalayas. I'm not a great mountaineer. I never was. Not even in school when, I grew up in Bavaria near the Alps, and you had to, there's always this hiking day in school at the end of the year, and you go up, and I always hated that. So, I like looking at the mountains. I just don't have to climb them.
Okay. So thank you very much for
You're
all
welcome.
your insights and this wonderful book. Though I'm not his promoter or publisher, I would still say that, it's always important to support a writer because this is a legacy writers leave behind. And me being a writer myself, I would just say, do go and buy the book. As I would say, do go and buy the Kali book as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Now, Sohini, being a dancer, I do know one thing, that the mythology, the stories, the legends of the Devi being the eternal goddess, and then we can't in India help bringing in the regional. Being a Bengali, the Kali is very, very important, whether it's Dakshineshwara near Kolkata or the big Kali temple there, or one of the Shakti Peeths close by in Assam, Kamakhya. Kali is a very, very important living presence in Bengal, from where Sohini comes. And then there is another layer to that. She's a dancer. And being a Bharatanatyam dancer, the trinity of Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh is always celebrated, but the eternal goddess is always present. So tell me, how much of your dance came into the book? And after doing the book, how much did your research go into your dance? Have you created new choreographies? Are you planning to look at Kali through your dance after your research? Because the many manifestations of Kali, she's the demonic one, she's the fearful one, she's not the Shanta Durga. So I just want to ask you, what is your relationship now, the book, the dance, and you?
Thank you, Alka. Brilliant question. Makes me think. Yes, see, my stage and my pen have always been interrelated. In research, suddenly you come upon something which you want to portray on stage, or while you're on stage and doing a particular piece, you're tempted to write about it. So there have been instances, for example, the Urdha Tandav. The Urdha Tandav episode has been a part of my choreographies, where Shiva and Kali playfully challenge each other to a dance contest. And Narada is keeping the beat, the snake is swaying to the rhythm, and Nandi is playing the mridangam. So they keep on dancing, and Shiva lifts up one leg completely in the Urdha Tandav posture, thinking that Kali would be embarrassed and being coy and bashful will not do it. But Kali shows equal flexibility and matches his steps. So that is, for me, an equality of the yin and the yang. It's not about patriarchy. That's passé. We've spoken about it. So equality, that is Kali for me. Shiva and Kali. Purush and Prakriti. The awareness and the energy. So this is one episode, the Urdha Tandav, which I have spoken about and performed it and written about it. And the second thing is about the relationship between Kali and Krishna, that not too many people talk about. When Shiva and Kali were the perfect couple, and they were totally in love. And in love, they decided that how would it be if we change our genders? How would our roles change? And next they manifested themselves, and Kali came back as Krishna, and Shiva came as Radha, to feel how he felt about that resilience and the patience factor. So playing fluidly with the gender also. So these were aspects which I have researched and found out, and I have portrayed on my stage and written about also, and there has been a complete overlap.
Do you think you're going to create new choreographies after this book?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm working on an abstract choreography on the Shunya, which is about darkness of Kali. And darkness is a very positive thing. Unless you have darkness, how can you have light? So to have light, to have that white energy, you need the darkness. And that is, the darkness can also be a writer's block. You may not be a Shakta. You may not believe in Shaktism or the theory of the Shakta cult. So then it could be your own writer's block when you come upon your muse. So various interpretations of how Kali, in an abstract manner, is the Shunya, the darkness, the abyss that leads to light.
So before I open it to the house, because it's very important that we have a dialogue, I'd like you to read something which will, again, inform our audience of your work, of your style of writing, and the voice in your book.
I think there's a Kali in all of us. In women who burn with love and fire, who reach their goals, who have a voice. That is who Kali is for me. And men who support and fan that fire. So my Kali is about unbridled feminine energy, the ultimate free spirit, beyond boundaries, timeless and indomitable. My Kali is the girl child, uninhibited, fearless, and without care. That's her sheer power and purity, swinging in her childlike glee, the entire cosmos in her power, light in her being, dancing forever beyond boundaries in timelessness. May we all ignite the power of Kali within us, now and forever.
Thank you very much. And much as I vowed that I'm not going to buy another book in my life, I'm trying to do a Marie Kondo and, make sure that the dust of Delhi, I don't have to clean, but, I will be buying both these books. So it's wonderful. And I'm very happy with the discussion. I'll open it to anybody who'd like to ask any questions to either of the robust people on either side of me.
Any questions? Yeah.
No, I was more concerned about the issue about the Indian culture and the Western way of predicting it through the media and different formats. One example I'd like to give over here, and what Indian people, the citizens of India, can do about that. It is the issue related not just to people like you who are creating awareness over here, but the entire Indian population has to do work on that. They have to create more and more awareness about these issues around the world. Oliver Stone, I think, had made a movie called Alexander. And we also had seen this movie in the Indian format, like Sikandar by Sohrab Modi and all. And I was fascinated by the kind of history which they had projected at that time. But the kind of projection which the Western people did, like Oliver Stone on this movie, of showing him as a homosexual person, a total Western concept. Most important, he showed that at that time, India was a very tribal and full of what you call, say, Adivasis, and not monkey men and all that, not porous or all those great empires which were already existed at that time. What he did and what he showed was totally different from the history what we have over here in India. But the answer was given to him by the exhibitors in India. When the movie was screened in India, they cut off almost half of the last part of the reel, and it was shown that the Alexander was shot by the bow by Porus, or whoever the tribal king was, and then he is defeated and he goes back. The entire middle part was cut off. And Oliver Stone and he in Hollywood had to sit and had to give interviews over there that was not the script which he had written. So you can understand how the Indian people can revolt on such kind of issues. Of course, there are elements like we have something like the swastika over here. Okay, now we always see there is always Nazism and comparing that with Hindu swastikas and all that. These issues are still going on. Even in well-cultured countries like Canada and recent issues are there. We have to create such kind of environment and a lot of awareness over here.
What is your question?
My question is, I'm just suggesting that people like you have to, and us also, not the entire audience, the Indian citizens have to work on this. Not just people like you who are creating awareness. You are doing a great job over here, writers for museum factors and other cultural activities, but we have to do this. So I would like you to suggest what India should do in this respect.
Okay, India should no, but that would be that's the whole problem, no? That now, if I now be sitting here and say like, you Indians should do this, then we're again in the same loop. I think, well, first of all, I think Indians are doing a lot because with this huge diaspora all over around the world, like everyday work is already just being in other places in the world, and every time someone says something, well, you can say something. And I think in that sense, Indians are even much more efficient than many other cultures in the world who don't have that possibility because they don't have the numbers and they don't have the reach. But the other thing is, like, I don't even know if it's all like India's responsibility, like defending yourself or like explaining yourself in a other way, because my feeling is like that's why I was so interested in that time also, is that in that time what basically happened is that in the West, I never understood that at the same time you have something like enlightenment, and then everybody looking back is proud of enlightenment, but later on we had like 2 world wars and everything. So like, how does this go together? And you had colonialism, imperialism, and that all happened after enlightenment. So how does this go together? And there's a very easy explanation is the fact of racism, because like once you can be enlightened and be like, yeah, we're all brothers and sisters and the humans, but well, how can we be that and go to other places and exploit them and enslave them? Well, we can do it if we have like biologically explain that some people are just unfortunately better than others. So you have racism, you go there and you're like, oh, we see that you're humans, we are just not as human as we are, so unfortunately we'll have to take that away from you, and we'll have to rename that mountain and whatever. So that is something that happened, and what I found so interesting about is that that colonization, of course, happened on a very brutal materialistic level, which is much easier to deal with, but the harder part to deal with is the soul, like we often call it the colonization of the soul. And this happened on both sides. Of course, it happened here, but it also happened to the colonizers. So the colonizers, in a way, ironically, colonized themselves. And I see that every day when I'm in Germany, that people will be having certain ideas about, let's, for example, say South Asia and people from here, because they somehow grew up with a certain idea how certain things in the West are superior to others. And sometimes there are certain things that they might be, where I would say like, yeah, there are things work much better in Germany than they work in, say, I don't know, Pakistan. But then there are other things where I'm like, they don't work nearly as well, but people are not aware of it. Like the German trains are like more than 50% of German trains nowadays are late. Yeah. Like more than 50% of German trains are late. Imagine, most people are like, what? Like, yeah, and then they make fun if there's like an Indian train with people sitting on it. I'm like, yeah, but who are you making fun of? You're not doing so much a better job. And I think that is something that not actually the Indians have to work on. That's more something that the Germans can work on. And one way we can do it is by actually, for example, if you let people in your country and into your culture, because then it will just happen by yourself. It's happening more and more. I live in Berlin, and I have to say, like, a lot of people who come to Berlin, for example, from India, they enter the society on a very high level because they come from IT, and I know that they earn much more than me. So they buy places, because they're like, they do jobs like, as a writer, I can never afford that. And I think that happens, and then people suddenly start rethinking, and then they stop associating certain things with certain people, such as like, oh, you must be poorer, or you must not be as, I don't know, widely traveled or what. I had this friend who got together with this Indian girl, and he's from a Bavarian village, and at some point the Indian parents came, visited them also in the family in the Bavarian village, and the Bavarian parents, they were like, oh, how is it for you? And they're like, oh, it's very nice. We usually go in the winter skiing here around here, you know. so and if you have more of these experiences, then that will help much more than any official stance or any kind of government decision. Yeah.
Thank you. I
Thank
think
you.
we have to stick to time, and if you have any more questions, you can meet both the authors in the signing tent and ask them the questions. Thank you very much.